Welcome to Quiet Mind Tales. Here, find peace and deep sleep. Let our calming stories and soothing meditations carry you away from worry. Press play, close your eyes, and drift away in peace. The station was almost silent, wrapped in the kind of stillness that only exists after midnight. A thin mist hung above the tracks, trembling each time a distant train passed. The narrator stood before a single dim light, holding a small ivory-colored ticket. There was no destination printed on it, only one line in elegant script. The Faraway Destinations Train, one way. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of rain and coal. When the train finally arrived, it did not announce itself with noise or urgency. It slowed, exhaling soft clouds of silver steam, as though it were breathing in the night. The narrator stepped aboard, greeted by the quiet rhythm of metal against metal, the subtle sway of something ancient yet alive. The seats were upholstered in deep blue velvet, warm as if they had been waiting for someone. Outside the window, the last lights of the station drifted away like falling stars. The landscape beyond was barely visible, a smear of darkness and faint reflections. Inside, a few passengers sat scattered through the carriage, their faces illuminated by the pale golden lamps above. No one spoke. Each person seemed to be listening, not to the train, but to something within themselves. As the train moved deeper into the night, the narrator felt time loosen its grip. The sound of the wheels became a lullaby, and the steady heartbeat of the engine promised a journey that asked for nothing. No arrival, no reason, only to be experienced. The world outside dissolved into silence and motion. The journey had begun. The night deepened, and the rhythm of the train softened into something almost hypnotic. Through the glass, the narrator could see the faint shimmer of dew gathering on the window's edge. Every few minutes, a shadow of trees or a distant hill would drift by, only to be swallowed again by darkness. It felt as though the world itself was exhaling in slow motion. The train slowed gently, the wheels sighing against the rails. Outside, a small station appeared, the sleeping village. Dim lanterns swayed from wooden poles, their light trembling on the wet ground. Houses beyond the platform looked as if they were dreaming. Their windows glowed faintly, curtains fluttering in rhythm with the night wind. A single cat crossed the tracks, its paws soundless on the damp stones. No one left the train. No one entered. Yet the narrator felt a strange presence, as if the village itself was aware of being watched. The sound of rain began to patter against the carriage, each drop a soft note in the symphony of the journey. Inside, passengers lifted their eyes for a moment, then returned to their quiet thoughts, their stillness almost sacred. The whistle sounded once, low and tender, and the train began to move again. The lights of the village faded into the mist, leaving only the rhythmic heartbeat of the wheels. The narrator leaned back, realizing that every stop was less a destination and more a dream passing by. The night softened into a deep indigo, and somewhere between sleep and awareness, the scent of lavender began to fill the carriage. It was faint at first, like a memory that had found its way back, but soon it drifted through the air in slow, invisible waves. The narrator opened the window slightly, and the cool breeze carried with it a view that seemed impossible. Beyond the tracks, endless lavender fields stretched under the moonlight. Each stalk swayed gently, their violet hues shimmering with silver light. The train passed through them in silence, as if afraid to disturb their still beauty. Even the engine seemed to quiet its breath, its metal heart beating softer now. The scent was intoxicating, peaceful, ancient, and tender. Inside the train, passengers leaned closer to the windows, their reflections merging with the moving flowers. For a moment, it felt as though the train wasn't crossing land, but floating over a dream painted in purple. A young woman near the narrator smiled faintly, whispering, "It smells like home." No one asked her where that was. Everyone simply understood. As the fields began to fade behind them, the narrator closed their eyes, feeling the rhythm of the tracks echoing like a lullaby. The lavender scent lingered long after it was gone, like a gentle promise that beauty, once found, never truly leaves. The carriage had grown quieter, as though even the sound of thought had faded into the hum of the wheels. The narrator sat by the window, watching their reflection ripple softly with every turn of the tracks. The glass was cool beneath their fingertips, trembling gently as the train moved through another stretch of nameless countryside. Outside, the world was only a blur of silver and shadow. A faint drizzle began to fall, painting the window with tiny rivers that glistened under the dim, golden lamps inside. The reflection of the narrator's face merged with these streaks of rain, making it impossible to tell where the world ended and they began. Time seemed to bend, stretching, folding, breathing with the motion of the train. In the faint glow of the cabin, other faces appeared in the glass. The old woman knitting quietly, the young man reading a letter, the child tracing patterns in the fogged-up window. Each reflection flickered like a candle, fragile but alive. They were all travelers, bound not by destination, but by the rhythm of the same endless night. The narrator smiled faintly at their own reflection, half there, half gone. The train's gentle sway whispered something unspoken, that perhaps in moving forward we slowly learn who we truly are, even if we never arrive. The soft clinking of porcelain cups drifted through the corridor, blending with the steady rhythm of the train. The narrator followed the faint aroma of tea until they reached the dining carriage, a warm, glowing space lined with polished wood and small lamps that flickered like captured fireflies. Steam curled from silver teapots carrying scents of jasmine, mint, and bergamot. An elderly attendant moved gracefully between the tables, his white gloves immaculate, his eyes calm and unreadable. Without a word, he poured a cup for the narrator, a deep amber color that shimmered beneath the light. The first sip was gentle and fragrant, a warmth that seemed to quiet every restless thought. Outside the window, the darkness pressed close, but inside, it felt like a pocket of stillness suspended in time. Around the carriage, the few passengers sat in silence, their gazes lost somewhere beyond the glass. A woman turned her teacup slowly, reading shapes in the ripples. A man stirred his sugar, though it had long since dissolved. The air felt thick with unspoken stories, each one steeping slowly like the tea itself. The narrator looked at their reflection in the cup and thought, perhaps every journey needs a pause, a moment to taste the quiet. And in that stillness, the train continued on, carrying its silent souls toward somewhere beautifully unknown. The train glided over the rails as if it had found a rhythm older than time itself. The night outside was deep and still until a shimmer appeared, soft, silver, expanding slowly until it revealed a vast, tranquil lake. The narrator leaned closer to the window, breath fogging the glass as the train curved along the edge of the water. The lake stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight. Its surface was so still it seemed like a mirror, reflecting the sky so perfectly that the stars appeared both above and below. The train's reflection moved across it, too, a glowing serpent of light gliding through the darkness. For a brief moment, it felt as if the world had doubled, one above, one below, both equally unreal. Inside the carriage, no one spoke. Even the usual hum of the wheels softened, respectful of the silence outside. The moon hung low and bright, watching itself ripple with each turn of the train's wheels. The narrator felt something wordless rise inside, a quiet awe, a reminder that beauty does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply waits to be noticed. As the lake faded behind them, its reflection lingered in the narrator's eyes. The moonlight followed the train for a while longer, like a companion unwilling to say goodbye. And then only the night remained, soft, endless, and listening. The steady rhythm of the train became softer, like a lullaby played from far away. In the dim glow of the carriage, the narrator noticed an old woman sitting near the far window. She wore a long gray coat and a scarf that shimmered faintly, as if woven from moonlight itself. Her hands moved gently, threading yarn through a pair of wooden needles with quiet precision. Each movement was slow but sure, the sound of the knitting needles forming a delicate counterpoint to the heartbeat of the rails. The yarn was a deep shade of blue, the color of twilight before the stars appear. With every loop and pull, it seemed she was weaving not fabric, but silence. The narrator watched, mesmerized, unable to tell whether she was creating something or remembering something. Occasionally, the woman lifted her eyes. Her gaze met the narrator's just once, and she smiled. A small, knowing smile, like someone who understood the weight of waiting. Then she returned to her work, her fingers dancing softly, endlessly. The scarf grew longer, resting across her lap like a river of calm. When the train passed through a tunnel, all the lights flickered for a moment. In the brief darkness, the sound of the needles stopped, and when the lights returned, the old woman was gone. Only the unfinished scarf remained on the seat, still warm, as if it remembered her touch. The faint chime of a bell echoed through the train, signaling a stop ahead. The narrator lifted their eyes from the soft twilight of the carriage to the passing shapes outside. Soon the train slowed, breathing a gentle sigh as it arrived at a small, unmarked platform surrounded by endless fields. A voice from the old speaker whispered, "The fields of quiet." Outside, the night had softened into mist. Fields of tall grass rippled under the touch of a slow wind, their movement gentle and rhythmic, as if the land itself was breathing. A single lantern swayed beside the platform, its light barely reaching the waiting bench below. There was no station building, no sound of footsteps, only the whisper of the grass and the distant hum of crickets. Inside the train, no one rose from their seats. The passengers simply turned their faces toward the window, as though they had all seen this place before, somewhere deep within memory. The narrator watched the fields shimmer, each blade of grass bending and rising like a wave in a silent sea. The world outside seemed so peaceful that even time appeared reluctant to disturb it. Then, without a word, the train began to move again. The sound of the rails returned, soft, familiar, like a heartbeat continuing after a long breath. The fields of quiet faded slowly into the mist, leaving behind a calm that lingered in the chest, light as the sigh of wind. The train glided gently, the rhythm of its motion blending with the heartbeat of the earth. A faint, violet hue began to color the darkness outside, like dawn hesitating before its time. The narrator pressed a hand to the cool glass, watching as the world unfolded into vast, endless lavender fields that shimmered softly under the pale silver moon. Each stalk swayed in graceful unison, their movements slow and musical, as though they were dancing to a melody only they could hear. The scent seeped through the thin crack of the window, a tender perfume that carried warmth, memory, and something deeply human. The narrator closed their eyes and breathed it in. It was peace made tangible. In the quiet of the carriage, the light from the lamps dimmed just enough to let the moonlight enter, filled the space with a bluish calm, painting every passenger in soft tones. The old scarf from before now rested neatly on an empty seat, its blue threads glowing faintly in the silver light. No one touched it, yet everyone seemed to notice. The lavender fields continued for miles, and as the train passed through, the sound of the wheels seemed to match their rhythm. The narrator thought that perhaps this was what eternity felt like. Not a place, but a moment that never ends. The scent of lavender lingered long after the fields had disappeared, a gentle reminder that beauty often visits quietly, then moves on without goodbye. The carriage was wrapped in soft shadows, illuminated only by the gentle glow of the lamps above. A child sat by the window, small fingers tracing shapes and lines on the fogged glass. With each stroke, a fleeting world appeared, a castle, a tree, a tiny train, and then disappeared as quickly as it came, leaving only the mist behind. The narrator watched, fascinated, as the child's imagination danced on the window pane. The lines shimmered in the faint light, reflections of a creativity untouched by time. Outside, the darkness moved past like a silent river, carrying the train over hills and through valleys, but inside, the child's drawings created a world as vivid as the one beyond the glass. Other passengers glanced quietly, smiles soft and fleeting, respecting the sacredness of the moment. The gentle motion of the train became a lullaby for the small artist, each turn of the wheels guiding the hand and spirit alike. There was no rush, no urgency, only the slow, deliberate unfolding of a story on a foggy canvas. As the drawings vanished and the child pressed a small hand to the window, the narrator felt a whisper of wonder in their chest. Perhaps the journey itself was a collection of such fleeting moments, brief glimpses of magic that leave their mark quietly without fanfare, but forever lingering in memory. The train slowed, its wheels whispering against the rails as it approached the next stop. Through the misted windows, the narrator could see tall trees glowing softly, their branches dotted with tiny, shimmering lights like scattered stars. The station was barely a platform, barely a clearing. It was more of an invitation to step into a dream. The glow of the forest pulsed gently, illuminating the silhouettes of the passengers as they leaned forward, captivated. The air smelled of damp earth and something sweetly floral, and the narrator felt a sense of reverence, as if this forest had been waiting patiently for centuries to be seen. No one spoke. Even breathing felt like a disturbance in the quiet enchantment. A firefly floated past the window, hovering long enough for the narrator to see its golden light flicker against the velvet night. Another joined, then another, until the entire grove seemed alive with a constellation of tiny stars, moving slowly, deliberately, as if dancing to the silent rhythm of the train. As the train resumed its journey, the forest remained in view for a few lingering moments, the glowing trees retreating into shadows. The narrator thought that perhaps some beauty is meant only to pass by us, leaving no trace but memory, and yet that memory is enough to light the heart for a lifetime. A soft melody drifted through the carriage, almost unnoticed at first, blending seamlessly with the hum of the train. The narrator turned to see a musician seated near the aisle, a violin resting against his shoulder. His eyes were closed, and his bow moved with a gentle precision, coaxing a sound that was at once melancholic and comforting. The passengers remained still, as if the music itself had asked for silence. Each note seemed to echo in the walls, reflecting off the windows and mingling with the soft rhythm of the wheels on the track. Outside, the night stretched endlessly, dark and unbroken, yet the melody made it feel intimate, almost like the train itself had found a voice. The narrator listened, letting the song weave around their thoughts, drawing memories and emotions from places long forgotten. Each passage of the bow painted a scene: a moonlit meadow, a quiet village, the delicate shimmer of a distant lake. The music held time in suspension, turning the ordinary motion of the train into a graceful, floating journey. When the last note lingered and finally faded into the carriage, the musician opened his eyes briefly, smiled faintly, and lowered his violin. The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was full, rich, and almost sacred. And the narrator understood, without words, that this journey was stitched together by such fleeting moments of quiet, delicate beauty. The carriage was quiet again, the soft hum of the engine like a heartbeat beneath the stillness. The narrator's gaze wandered across the passengers, studying the gentle lines of their faces. Each person seemed wrapped in their own thoughts, their expressions calm, almost serene, as if the journey itself had softened them. A woman with silver-streaked hair looked out the window, tracing the passing shadows with her eyes, while a man beside her held a small notebook, writing slowly, deliberately, unaware of anyone else. A child clutched a worn teddy bear, eyes half closed, drifting between dream and wakefulness. Each face told a story, though none was spoken aloud. The narrator found something comforting in their quiet, shared solitude. No one demanded attention, no one needed explanations. There was a unity in the stillness, a gentle acknowledgement that the train was a vessel carrying not destinations, but shared experience. The faces, bathed in the pale glow of the lamps, seemed timeless, suspended in the rhythm of the journey. As the train curved along the next bend, the reflections of the passengers in the windows merged with the darkness outside, creating a tapestry of presence and absence. The narrator realized that perhaps the essence of the journey was not the scenery, but the silent communion of those who traveled together, each carrying a universe of their own. The train slowed as it approached a gentle curve in the tracks, revealing the faint glimmer of water below. The narrator pressed their hand to the glass, watching as the train passed over a narrow bridge that spanned a calm river. The surface of the water was smooth, reflecting the night sky with such clarity that it seemed like a second universe lying beneath the train. The soft murmur of flowing water mingled with the rhythmic clatter of the wheels, creating a quiet symphony. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and fresh water, a scent so subtle it almost went unnoticed, yet it filled the carriage with a sense of calm. The passengers leaned slightly toward the windows, mesmerized by the gentle motion of the river below. Small lights from distant houses flickered along the riverbank, like fireflies frozen in time. The narrator felt the contrast between the silent, endless movement of the water and the slow, deliberate progress of the train. It was as if the river carried memories while the train carried the present, each complementing the other in quiet harmony. As the bridge disappeared behind them, the river stretched into darkness once more. leaving only the echo of its soft song in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The narrator sighed, realizing that moments like this, the passing of quiet beauty, were what made the journey unforgettable. The moon hung low and luminous, its reflection stretching across the dark landscape as the train moved forward. The narrator watched silently as silver light spilled through the carriage windows, painting everything it touched in a soft, ethereal glow. It felt as if the moon itself had decided to accompany the journey, tracing its path alongside the train. Shadows shifted gently with each sway of the carriage, creating fleeting shapes on the floor and walls. The passengers seemed almost suspended in the glow, their faces calm and contemplative, illuminated by the quiet magic of the night. The moonlight turned the ordinary seats, the polished wood, and the soft velvet cushions into something dreamlike, as if the carriage had become a vessel floating between worlds. Outside, the landscape was a series of silver and black waves, hills and trees blending into the night. The narrator felt a strange intimacy with the moon, as though it were silently sharing its own thoughts, and with each glance, the light seemed to whisper a promise of peace and continuity. As the train continued, the moon slowly dipped behind distant hills, leaving a soft, lingering glow in the sky. The narrator leaned back, heart quiet, feeling the gentle pulse of the journey and the constant, serene presence of the moon, a companion that needed no words. A young woman sat alone by the window, a small notebook open on her lap. Her fingers moved, deliberately, pen scratching across the paper, crafting sentences that were meant for someone far away, or perhaps for no one at all. The narrator noticed the care in her movements, the quiet intensity of a mind engaged in a conversation that existed only in ink and thought. The train hummed beneath them, the rhythmic sound of wheels over rails blending seamlessly with the soft scratching of her pen. Outside, darkness stretched in endless folds, broken only by occasional glimmers of distant lights. It was as if the world had paused for her words, giving them space to exist, to breathe, and to echo quietly against the night. Passengers passed her in silence, some glancing briefly, then continuing their own contemplations. No one asked to see what she was writing. The act itself seemed private and sacred, a tiny beacon of human thought in the vast quiet of the journey. The narrator could almost feel the emotion behind the strokes, the longing, the hope, the fleeting warmth of memory captured in every line. When she finally closed the notebook, a faint smile lingered on her lips. The train continued its slow passage through the night, carrying the unsent words along with it, leaving behind only the soft, lingering thought that perhaps some journeys are meant to carry our messages, even if they are never delivered. The train slowed as it approached a series of towering silhouettes in the distance. The narrator pressed a hand to the window, watching as mountains rose from the darkness like silent guardians. Their peaks glimmered faintly under the pale moonlight, jagged yet serene, untouched by human movement. The air felt cooler here, sharper, carrying the scent of stone and pine. Each passenger seemed to inhale the stillness along with it, letting the quiet settle deep into their chest. The train moved slowly, deliberately, as if aware that this place demanded reverence rather than haste. Shadows of clouds passed over the peaks, shifting light and dark in a subtle dance. The narrator imagined the mountains had been standing for centuries, witnessing countless journeys, and that the train was merely a fleeting presence in their timeless watch. The silence was profound, broken only by the gentle clatter of the wheels and the occasional rustle of the wind. As the train curved away, the mountains lingered in view, stoic and eternal. The narrator felt a soft humility, a quiet awe, realizing that some landscapes are not just seen, they are felt, carried silently within the soul as the journey continues onward. The carriage was wrapped in an unusual hush, the kind of silence that feels as if it carries secrets. The narrator could almost hear the faintest whispers, not of the train itself, but of the passengers. Low murmurs traveled just above the breath, words too soft to catch, yet filled with emotion. Perhaps memories, regrets, or quiet hopes. A man near the window shifted slightly, his lips moving as he spoke without sound, as if telling the story only to himself. A woman in the corner pressed a hand to her chest, listening to some inner voice that no one else could hear. Even the child asleep with their head on a cushion seemed to dream in soft murmurs. The narrator leaned back, noticing the shared intimacy in this quiet space. Each whisper was private, yet they wove together an invisible tapestry of human life, fragmented stories flowing side by side in the soft rhythm of the train. It was a language of solitude, yet profoundly communal, connecting passengers without a single spoken word. As the train rolled forward, the whispers faded into the night, blending seamlessly with the sway of the carriage. The narrator smiled faintly, understanding that the journey was not only measured by landscapes and stations, but by these fleeting, invisible echoes of life passing quietly alongside them. The narrator noticed a man sitting alone near the rear of the carriage, completely absorbed in a book. Its cover was plain, no title, no illustrations, just a soft, worn leather that seemed older than anyone could guess. The man's eyes moved slowly across the pages, as if devouring not only the words but the very silence around him. Outside, darkness stretched endlessly, broken only by occasional flickers of moonlight or distant lanterns. The man did not glance up once. He seemed to exist entirely in the world of the book, a place unseen and untouched by the train or the night. The narrator wondered what stories could be so compelling that they demanded such devotion. The passengers around him remained quiet, giving him the space he seemed to inhabit completely. Even the train itself seemed to slow slightly, letting his absorption dictate the rhythm for a few fleeting moments. It was a rare stillness, a tiny pocket of time that existed independently of the journey. As the narrator watched, a faint smile crossed the man's lips. Whether it was joy, recognition, or understanding, no one could tell. The train moved on, carrying him, the book, and the silent magic of that private world along the endless tracks of night. As the train emerged from a bend, the narrator glimpsed a village bathed in a soft, golden haze. The rooftops glimmered faintly under the glow, dust particles catching the light like tiny sparks suspended in air. The platform was almost invisible, as if the village existed in a dream, half real, half imagined. The streets were empty, the houses silent, yet the narrator felt a warmth emanating from within the homes. Curtains fluttered gently in the night breeze, and the faint scent of baking bread and worn wood lingered in the air. It was a village that seemed to breathe slowly, in harmony with the gentle rhythm of the train passing through. Passengers turned their eyes to the windows, some leaning closer to the glass, absorbing the soft, golden glow. There was a shared understanding that this village, like all the others, was a fleeting marvel, meant to be seen but never entered. Its magic lay not in permanence, but in the momentary hush it left behind. As the train moved forward, the village faded into mist, leaving only a lingering warmth in the narrator's chest. The golden haze remained in memory, a quiet promise that beauty can pass through the night, unnoticed yet deeply felt. The train seemed to slow, almost imperceptibly, as if it were taking a deep breath. The narrator leaned back in their seat, noticing the gentle sway of the carriages, the rhythmic hiss of the wheels, and the soft exhale of steam from the engine. It was as though the train itself were alive, pulsing in tune with the night. Outside, the darkness flowed past like liquid ink, occasionally broken by the dim glow of distant lights. The motion was smooth, almost tender, carrying the passengers in a slow embrace that left no urgency behind. Every sound, the wheels, the faint whistle, the soft rustle of curtains, was part of a quiet symphony, orchestrated by the steady movement of the journey. Inside the carriage, passengers remained still, each caught in their own contemplation. The subtle rhythm of the train seemed to synchronize their breathing, creating a shared pulse of calm. The narrator felt a soft connection to this living machine, a sense of trust that it would carry them safely through the endless night. As the train exhaled again, a faint warmth lingered in the air, a reminder that the journey was not only through space, but through the quiet spaces within oneself. The narrator closed their eyes, letting the gentle breath of the train guide them forward, deeper into the night. The carriage was filled with a soft mist, tiny droplets clinging to the windows like fragile crystals. The narrator pressed a finger to the glass, watching the patterns swirl and merge as the train glided through the night. Each movement made the fog shift, creating fleeting shapes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Outside, the darkness was nearly complete, with only occasional glimmers of moonlight touching the edges of the fog. The landscape seemed to exist in a suspended state, blurred and softened by the curtain of moisture. The narrator felt as if the train had entered a secret world, one that existed between reality and dream. Passengers traced their own patterns on the glass, some with fingers, others simply observing the quiet dance of condensation. No one spoke. Each reflection, each swirl of fog, was part of an intimate ritual shared silently among the travelers. The train hummed beneath them, carrying them through this liquid veil, steady and unwavering. When the fog began to thin, the narrator pressed their hand once more to the window, feeling the cool glass and the faint warmth of the carriage behind. The world had transformed in a few fleeting moments, leaving a gentle reminder that beauty often hides in the softest, most ephemeral places. The train slowed to a gentle pace as it approached a wide, open meadow. The narrator gazed out the window and saw a field dotted with wildflowers, their colors muted in the soft silver light of the night. There was a sense of familiarity here, a quiet echo of memories that seemed almost forgotten. The passengers remained silent, leaning slightly to catch glimpses of the landscape. Some smiled faintly, as if recalling distant childhoods, the innocence and simplicity of moments long past. The air carried the faint scent of grass and earth, evoking an unspoken nostalgia that touched everyone aboard. The narrator felt a gentle pull at their heart, a mixture of longing and comfort. The meadow stretched endlessly, yet it seemed intimate, like a private memory shared by all who looked upon it. The train moved slowly, allowing the field and its fleeting beauty to linger in their minds, unhurried and tender. As the train departed, the meadow faded into the darkness, leaving behind only the warmth of recollection. It was a quiet reminder that some landscapes do not exist merely outside, but also within, carrying the echoes of childhood that remain alive in the heart. The narrator gazed out the window, where the landscape had softened into shadows and silvery light. In the quiet of the carriage, memories surfaced unbidden, faces, places, and fleeting moments from years long gone. The gentle sway of the train seemed to guide these recollections, as if the journey itself encouraged introspection. A soft sigh passed through the carriage, blending with the rhythmic clatter of the wheels. Passengers sat quietly, some closing their eyes, letting past experiences drift alongside the train. The narrator felt an intimate connection to this shared reflection, recognizing that each traveler carried invisible stories, folded delicately within themselves. Outside, the night moved on in silent continuity, hills and trees slipping past in muted patterns. Each passing scene seemed to act as a mirror, reflecting fragments of memory back to the observer. Time felt suspended, both fleeting and eternal, as the train carried its passengers through the landscapes of both night and mind. As the train moved forward, the narrator allowed a faint smile, acknowledging the bittersweet beauty of memory. The past, they realized, traveled alongside the present, weaving itself into the fabric of the journey in ways both gentle and profound. An elderly man leaned back in his seat, speaking softly under his breath. His words were inaudible to anyone else, yet the narrator felt their weight, as if each syllable carried fragments of a story long untold. The passengers remained absorbed in their own quiet worlds, yet a subtle harmony seemed to arise from the gentle murmur. The train hummed steadily beneath them, its rhythm matching the cadence of his whispers. Outside, darkness stretched endlessly, dotted occasionally by distant lights that flickered like tiny, forgotten memories. The narrator imagined the words weaving themselves into the fabric of the night, invisible threads connecting the travelers in ways unseen but deeply felt. No one asked him to repeat anything. No one interrupted. It was a private conversation, one that belonged to the space between heartbeats, a language understood by those who paused long enough to listen. Even the soft clatter of the wheels seemed to defer to his voice, carrying the intangible weight of his stories onward. As the train moved forward, the whispers faded into silence, leaving a gentle resonance behind. The narrator realized that some words are never meant to be heard. They exist instead to shape the quiet spaces we carry within us, subtle, invisible, and infinitely lasting. The train moved slowly through the night, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels blending with the distant whispers of the river. Beyond the window, the narrator glimpsed lights shimmering beneath the surface of a vast, quiet waterway. Buildings rose and fell like ghosts, reflected in the still depths, giving the impression of cities submerged under a silver mirror. The passengers leaned slightly forward, captivated by the scene. It was neither frightening nor sad. Instead, the submerged cities seemed serene, eternal, as if time itself had slowed to preserve them. The faint ripples of water made the reflections dance, creating a dreamlike panorama that stretched far beyond the edges of the imagination. The narrator felt a quiet awe, marveling at the beauty of something simultaneously hidden and visible. Each glimmer of light reflected in the water felt like a fragment of countless untold stories, a record of life moving silently beneath the surface. The train's motion carried them forward, past these submerged memories, leaving only a fleeting connection in the mind. As the cities faded from view, The water shimmered one last time before dissolving into darkness. The narrator understood without words that some places are never meant to be reached. They exist instead to be witnessed briefly, treasured in quiet reflection as the journey continues. The night stretched endlessly outside the windows, a vast canvas of darkness dotted with faint stars. The narrator felt a peculiar sensation, as if the train were slowly drifting out of time itself. Every wheel turn, every soft rumble beneath the carriages seemed to carry them farther from the ordinary flow of hours and minutes. Passengers remained quietly absorbed in their own thoughts, yet the air was thick with a shared awareness of this unusual suspension. Faces appeared more contemplative, eyes reflecting the faint glow of the lamps, as if the train's journey through the night had opened a space for reflection and stillness unattainable in daily life. Outside, landscapes blurred into abstract shapes, forests, hills, rivers, recognized only in fleeting glimpses. Time seemed to fold and stretch in harmony with the gentle sway of the carriage, leaving a soft impression that moments themselves were fragile and transient, yet infinitely meaningful. The narrator leaned back, feeling the subtle shift in perception. In this suspension, they realized the journey itself was the destination, a delicate passage where time dissolved, leaving only the quiet rhythm of the train and the calm awareness of being fully present. The narrator discovered a small, overlooked balcony at the end of the carriage. Stepping onto it, they felt the crisp night air brush against their face, carrying with it scents of pine, damp earth, and distant fires. The train hummed steadily beneath their feet, a companion to the gentle night that unfolded endlessly around them. The world outside seemed magnified here. Hills and trees, rivers and fields, all moved in a quiet procession beneath the silver glow of the moon. The narrator felt a sense of freedom in this open space, a rare pause from the enclosed carriage and its gentle stillness, as if the train had momentarily allowed them to float above its steady path. Inside, the passengers occasionally glanced toward the balcony, but none approached. It was a private sanctuary, a thin threshold between the journey and the infinite night. Each breath drawn here felt like a dialogue with the wind, an intimate acknowledgement of the vastness that surrounded the slow-moving train. As the train continued, the narrator stepped back inside, bringing with them the lingering chill and the profound sense of expansiveness. The small balcony had been a fleeting gift, a reminder that even within a continuous journey, there are spaces where the soul can stretch and breathe freely. The train passed into a stretch of track lined with small lamps, their warm glow cutting through the darkness like scattered stars tethered to the earth. The narrator pressed their face closer to the window, mesmerized by the rhythmic flicker as the train moved steadily forward. Passengers noticed, too, leaning slightly, eyes reflecting the light. The lamps stretched into the distance, forming an endless path that seemed both deliberate and accidental, as if someone had carefully sprinkled moments of warmth along the way. Each light passed in a gentle cadence, creating a pattern that was soothing, almost hypnotic in its simplicity. Outside, shadows danced between the glowing lamps, trees, fences, and occasional rooftops, all painted briefly in gold before slipping back into darkness. The narrator felt a soft rhythm connecting all these elements, a silent choreography orchestrated by the gentle pulse of the train. As the stretch of lamps finally faded behind them, the narrator exhaled slowly, carrying the lingering warmth in their chest. The light had been fleeting, yet it had left a gentle mark, a quiet reminder that even brief encounters can illuminate a journey. The train moved through the night, carrying its passengers over hills and along rivers, when a sudden gust of wind swept across the carriage roof. The narrator pressed a hand against the cool metal, feeling the subtle tremor as the breeze danced over the train. It was a fleeting sensation, yet it seemed to awaken the senses, sharpening awareness of the night. Outside, the darkness shifted with the wind, shadows bending and stretching across the landscape. The faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of water added layers to the quiet rhythm of the train, creating a subtle symphony of movement and stillness. Passengers stirred lightly, some pressing faces to the windows to watch the night react to the gust. The train's motion remained steady, as if it had anticipated this delicate conversation with the wind. The narrator felt a sudden intimacy with the elements, a reminder that the journey was as much about the world passing by as it was about the spaces within themselves. As the wind settled and the night returned to calm, the narrator smiled softly. The brief touch of nature had left an impression, a reminder that even fleeting moments could hold the quietest forms of wonder.